Hello everybody, this is Hammer Striker here. Today I'm going to do a video talking about you want a compact gun like the Glock 19, but you don't want or can't get a Glock 19. What are the other options available? Please don't forget to check out our website. Go to our affiliates page. You'll find discount codes for things like Mantis X and Core belts. Link to that cool little bore light that we use for lighting up the barrels. Use those links. It will often save you money, never will cost you any additional money, and helps the channel. Thank you. So the Glock 19 has kind of become the de facto standard for compact guns. It's kind of a good balance, it's a good size. It gives you the ability to carry it just about anywhere, but you don't give up so much capacity that it's not useful for either a range day gun or a nightstand gun or other things like that. So the Glock 19 itself holds 15 rounds in the flush magazine, and in magazines you can go up to 33, and then there's drums, you can go even higher than that. So the Glock has a lot of aftermarket support. The length of the gun is 7.28 front to back. With the flush mag, it's 5.04 inches tall, it's 1.34 inches thick, and it's actually the lightest of everything I've got on the table at 21.5. This particular one happens to be a Gen 5. The Gen 4s are still available, and Gen 3s may still be able to be found. They're very similar, you just get into differences in the grip, with, without finger grooves, that type of thing. So why wouldn't I just get a Glock then? Well, grip angle. Some people don't like the grip angle of the Glock. Glocks tend to be the first things to disappear from the shelves when there's any kind of a stress going on. The Glocks all just evaporate. So there was a period of time you could want a Glock 19 all you wanted, but you weren't going to get one. So what else is out there that would be a good alternative? Now, to keep this video short, I'm not going to talk about the size and dimensions and weight of everything I pick up. This video would be 2 days long, or a mini-series, but I will mention if one is significantly different. So the baseline is the size of this 19 and 15 rounds. A couple of the rules we put in had to be striker, because the Glock 19 is a striker gun, so all these are striker. Had to be within a 1/4 inch of length and a 1/2 inch of height. Other than that, we kind of kept it flexible, because if I narrowed it down too tight, then you'd end up with a Glock 19. So starting with the first one on the list, we'll start with the P320. Now these are in no particular order. This is a 6-hour P320. These are in no particular order, it's just the order we ended up stacking them on the table. So it's not best to worst or any of that type of thing, worst to best, it's just random order. So this particular gun holds between 15 in the magazine you see and up to 30 depending on which other Sig magazine you've got. These have become very popular. They've got that modular chassis, they're available in a number of different variations. They generally have rails, there's optics ready versions of them. The different ones usually have good sights, so usually some variation of a 3-dot sight, and they tend to have relatively nice triggers. So the magazine out of it. It's kind of a shortish, light trigger. It's a nice smooth wall. Overall, it's got a nice trigger. One thing I didn't mention earlier about the Glock is the Glock has the drop safety and the inertial toggle on the trigger. So the Glock is designed to be drop safe. The Sig is designed to be drop safe. It does lack the inertial toggle. My preference is on a striker gun that uses any kind of a drop safety internal to the slide, I prefer to have the inertial toggle. So this one I'm not as fond of for carrying for that reason, and that's just my desire to have that inertial toggle. Overall, with the grip frame compatibility and the number of different variations, if you like SIGs and you like the P320, these are a good option, and these are relatively easy to find. These tend to be out there. Now I'm going to go ahead and put the magazine back in it so I can do a comparison. You'll see it is a little bit taller, but it's when I do beaver tail to beaver tail, because this thing does have a fairly extended beaver tail, when I do it beaver tail to beaver tail, it is a little bit longer, it's a little bit taller, but it fits inside of that. And by the way, there is a thumb safety version of this P320 available for those that like a thumb safety. You can actually see the cutout where it would go on the frame, so if this fire control group were a thumb safety fire control group, I'd pop that little tab out. And by the way, this one does have an internal frame that can be pulled out that's actually the firearm. So you can swap out grip frames from this internal chassis. So there's kind of a lot of popularity on the P320. I'll move along to another one, and that is the CZ P10C. There's a couple different size variations of this, but this is the one that's closest to the Glock 19. And in its factory magazine, it also holds 15. And there is up to a 19 round, so the full-size version of this. There's not as much aftermarket support for the CZs. And you'll see the grip height's just a hair higher. This is getting a little bit closer to the size of the Glock 19. So the grip's just a bit taller, and it's just a bit longer if I line it up correctly and don't bump it with my hand. But this is very close to a Glock 19 size. When they came up with this compact, I think that's what they were targeting. I want to show you the trigger, but this one's an Apex trigger, so that of course wouldn't be a fair comparison. So I'm going to set that aside. I'm going to pull out, this is a P10S. So it's a smaller gun, but this is the factory trigger. It does have the inertial toggle. It's styled like a flatty trigger, but it's not truly a flatty trigger. A little bit of take up. Nice crisp light break. Nice short reset. You're right on the wall. And then the break. So the P10 does actually have a really nice trigger. So I'll set that back aside and I'll move to the next one. This is an interesting one. This is the IWI Masada. IWI makes a lot of really cool firearms, but you tend to see them more often in rifles and things like that. The Masada came out, it's a striker fired gun, and it's actually a really cool entry into the market. So this one, if I get the mag release, holds 17. Now it is a little bit taller, but it fit within that threshold we were looking for. And of course it's unloaded. The trigger is really short, really light. And I just put my finger on it to take up the take-up, and I actually pulled. It's got about an average reset. It's almost all the way out of that relatively short travel overall. And then again, a very light, crisp break. 3-dot sights. And overall, this gun worked well, was reliable. These aren't super common. You can't find them everywhere. But a lot of people are overlooking them when they are there. So if you're trying to find a gun, let's say you want a Glock 19 but you can't find one, the IWI would be a good choice. Now it is a little bit taller in the grip and a little bit longer on the slide. This is kind of maybe halfway between a 19 and a 17 from a size perspective, but it still fits within the threshold. Overall, you can get in this particular gun 17 rounds. There aren't other variations of it in other magazines, so 17 is your max. Overall, you're still going to find that the Glock itself is going to have the largest mag capacity variations because it's been around so long and it's so well supported in the aftermarket. The aftermarket hasn't really picked up on the IWI as much. But really nice gun. I would definitely say you would want to consider one of these if you come across one. And the next one is made by Walther. It's the PDP. This is the evolution of the PPQ, which was the evolution of the P99, and these have actually become quite popular. When they first came out, they were kind of mixed reception, partially because the styling is significantly different than the PPQ, and the PPQ was well loved. And everybody's like, well, why get rid of the PPQ? It's a perfect gun. PDP has actually proven to be very reliable, just as reliable as the PPQ. They did not ruin the awesome PPQ trigger. So before I talk about the trigger, talk about the mag. It's got 15 round capacity, and it can go up to 18 rounds using magazines from other PPQ variants. But the trigger, very light take up, super short crisp break, and one of the shortest resets out there on a striker fired gun. Right back on the wall, and then that short crisp break. The PPQ's trigger has become the standard to meet in a striker fired gun. If you're going to make a striker fired gun and you want to call your trigger awesome, it needs to be at least as good, if not better, than the PPQ. And it's a very heavy lift. And again, PPQ, PDP, those same similar operating mechanisms, but this is a PDP. It has a similar styling to what you saw come out on the Q5 and the Q4 when that came out. And it's got a nice beaver tail. 3-dot adjustable sights, so the rear sight is adjustable. This is a really good entry in the market, and if you don't like the PDP styling, you might still find a PPQ, even though they sold fairly fast, so I doubt there's a lot of new old stock out there. But get past the styling if you are willing to give this thing a try. Excellent gun, it feels nice in the hand, dead reliable, eats everything we've tried to feed it. This would really be a good alternative to a Glock 19 in the description of what we're trying to do. So I'll set that guy aside. One more thing before we move on to the next thing, because I screwed up and forgot to set it up side by side. You'll see it's just a hair taller and just a hair longer. The claim to fame for this one against the Glock 19 is its trigger beats the Glock 19 hands down. I like Glock triggers, but there's no comparison. When the PPQ comes in, everybody else goes home who's trying to claim they have the best trigger. Keep calling that thing a PPQ because I've been around PPQ so long and it's a similar gun, but again, that's a PDP. The next one is the Smith & Wesson MMP M2.0. I used to hate the MMP line. I hated the triggers. They were just awful, gritty, really bad triggers. And then they came out with the M2.0 and they solved that. Now, an important note that had kind of come up is some people had the original before the M2.0 and the trigger wasn't as bad. They'd been making evolutionary improvements on the trigger over time. I was kind of going back to the first MMP I picked up early on and really kind of wrote the MMP line off. The M2 came out with the trigger, the ergonomics, and the styling, really good 3-dot sights, and it really became a gun I really actually like. I've got several in this MMP line now, and also the Shield. The Shield is the same thing. The Shield, which is not a Glock 19 competitor, had a hideous trigger, and they drastically improved it. With a magazine in the MMP that holds 15, so this is labeled to 14, but it goes out to 15, and up to 17 available, you've got the equivalent capacity. You have a hinged trigger, but that gives you that inertial safety. A little bit of take-up. Nice short, crisp break. Decent reset, not the shortest reset out there. And then a nice break. Overall, a good trigger. So this gun is a viable replacement for the Glock 19. And one thing I didn't note is if you flip the magazine over, that's 14 on one side, 15 on the other. Most magazines put all their witness holes either on the back or on one side. This has them alternating. So again, you do get 15 in the mag that fits flush, and 17 if you use the extended mag. And dimensionally, it's only a hair longer when I line them up even, but the height of the grip is almost identical. So this is probably one of the closer comparisons of size to the Glock 19. And you're actually getting quite a good gun. These have proven to be reliable. They eat just about everything. They've got nice triggers now, and a lot of aftermarket support. Holsters and things like that are available. So I would definitely consider the M&P as a possible replacement for a Glock 19. When I was doing that size comparison, by the way, that is the first gun on the list that actually is a hair smaller, beating the gun, in a couple dimensions. So it's the first one that comes close to being just a little hair thinner and everything else. But again, it's really, really close. The next one on the list that I'm going to pull out is the HK VP9. And these have been a popular gun all along. One other note on that Smith, it may be beating it dimensionally, but it's also the heaviest. 27 ounces, matches with another gun that I'm going to show you shortly. So there is a bit of a weight penalty you're going to pay. Going back to the VP9 that I've just picked up here, this gun is really, when they came out with this VP series, there was a really nice entry. So if I do the trigger, nice short, crisp break, decent resets, kind of on the short side, it's not the shortest, and again the break. And this is the B series, and that stands for button. One of the things about the original VP9 is it had a little paddle release, and a lot of people didn't like that, so they came out with the button version, and that's more of what people are used to, at least in the United States. And so at this point, there's nothing to distract you from what you're used to working with other guns. Nice 3-dot sights. These little wings make it easy to get a hold of to cycle the slide. Overall, a very likable gun, and it holds 17 rounds in its flush magazine, and that's really the biggest magazine you can currently get for it. There is less aftermarket support for the VP9 than there are for some other guns. So let's put these things up side by side. So I've put it up side by side. It is a little bit longer and a little bit taller, but it does fit within the requirements of not being past those measurements. But it is a little bit bigger than a 19, but not so much that you couldn't put it in the place of a Glock 19. These have proven to be reliable. The only thing we did encounter with this is when you get really weak ammo, which we ended up with a batch of really weak ammo, you didn't want to cycle really weak ammo. Glock 19 eats absolutely everything. So if you choose the VP9, I still think you're getting a great gun, but you may have to be a little more careful what you feed it. Make sure you test it with whatever it is you're going to feed it, which that's true of any gun, because this just didn't seem to like weaker ammo, and this does have some rounds through it, so it's past any kind of a break-in period. So now we'll move on to the FN 509M. Enough guns that are starting to reach the length of my arm. The FN 509M is a really nice gun. The original 509 came out and it was a Glock 17 size gun, which is still good, but it kind of got passed over by a lot of the concealed carry people that are looking for a compact. You get 15 rounds in it, really nice ergonomics, really nice 3-dot sights. Everything about this gun is nice. These are very reliable, they're well proven, they're comfortable to hold. Now I'm going to demonstrate the trigger, but I'm not going to demonstrate this one because this one's another Apex, and again I want to kind of keep it fair. So I'm going to pick up a gun that doesn't really fit the size category, but it is the stock FN trigger. They use a hinge for the inertial toggle, so you do at least have the inertial toggle. A little bit of take up, kind of a stiffer, short, crisp break. Slightly longish reset, but still a reasonable reset. You're right on the wall, a little bit of take up of once you start putting pressure on it. And again, that stiff kind of short break. It's kind of a little bit more of what might be a combat trigger than some of these others. It's not a bad trigger, but it is a little bit heavier and a little bit stiffer than some of the other triggers out there. From a size comparison, height-wise it's fairly close, and length-wise it's fairly close, so I get it lined up correctly. It's just maybe just a hair longer, both in height and length. So overall, close enough to a Glock 19 that if that's what you're looking for, it would be a good one to put in that place. We'll set that guy aside and go to the next one. So the last one in the list is the XDM, Springfield Armory XDM Elite. So the Elite is the latest series of the XDM, and the XDM is the match variant of the XD. These are really, really high quality guns, really reliable, really popular. This particular one is the 10mm. Why am I showing you a 10mm when this is all about 9s? Because they make the Elite in a 9mm and I don't have one. And I didn't want to exclude the XDM from even being discussed simply because I didn't have one of that size, because it really is a good candidate for it. So the 9mm is just a little shorter than this in both directions, and it's a little bit lighter at 27 ounces. This is 29 ounces, but and the 9mm holds 14 rounds, and it can go up to the 22 round mags that are available. So with the 3.8 version of the XDM Elite, you are losing a round against the Glock 19, but you're also getting one that is shorter in all dimensions. So the 3.8 compact, the XDM, would be smaller in all dimensions than the Glock 19, height and length, but it is a little heavier than the Glock 19 at 27 rounds. So again, consider this just to be representative of what the XDM looks like. So I'm going to hold them up side by side. Now again, this one is a 10mm, so it's got a few dimensions are not perfectly comparable, but you can see this one's pretty close to the Glock 19 in size, and you figure the 9mm would be a little shorter in each dimension, so the 9mm does make a good choice. I would definitely consider the Springfield if you are looking for a replacement for the Glock 19. A couple of last kind of things in wrapping up. The Glock 19 is available in an MOS, which is an optic-ready version. And every one of the guns I showed you has either the only optics ready, some of them just they're optics ready, period. If they're not all optics ready, they have an optics ready variant available. So from an advantages standpoint, the optics ready on the Glock doesn't necessarily supplant that. So we're down to, if I could have any gun on the table, which would I have? Well, personally, it'd be a Glock 19. But this video is about I can't have a Glock 19 for some reason. So what would I have? Well, I probably would definitely go, and I would consider the Springfield. They tend to be really good, reliable guns. Of course, if I'm trying to get a Glock 19, I'd get the 9mm version of it for that, not the 10mm. But the other one that would really come to the top is the Walther PDP. because they didn't ruin what the PPQ was when they evolved it into the PDP. They just changed some of their ergonomics, and some of them for the better. These serrations are really easy to get a hold of, and they added optic retic capability. These have proven to be so reliable. They have such a nice trigger, and size-wise, they're so close to a Glock 19. This probably would be my choice of all of them, would probably be the PDP. And then the only other one that's kind of fun to take at the range, because it just works so well, was the Masada. But the Masada has kind of got some differences that start to differentiate it away from the Glock 19. It's a little bit bigger and things like that. So we'll come back to, if I can't have a Glock 19, I'm probably going to have a PDP. Beyond that, if you like our videos, please give us a thumbs up, share, subscribe, click that bell to be notified if you do. Check us out on Facebook, Patreon, Instagram, Twitter, Getter. We're kind of everywhere. And thank you.